Snow fell like ash over the Sierra Nevada mountains, blanketing the earth in a silence so complete it felt like the world had ended. Beneath that crushing stillness, 81 pioneers waited for spring, or death. They were the Donner Party, a wagon train that had once set out for California with hope, laughter, and the promise of a new beginning. But by December of 1846, those dreams were buried under 20 feet of snow. It began months earlier, on a warm May morning in Springfield, Illinois. Families packed their wagons with flour, bacon, and rifles, bound for the golden promise of the West. George Donner, a dignified 60-year-old farmer, was elected captain. His name would become infamous before winter's end. Alongside him rode James Reed, a proud Irish-American businessman with ambition as vast as the plains ahead. They joined hundreds of others following the Oregon Trail, a journey brutal but survivable. Then came the fateful decision to take a new route, the Hastings Cutoff, a supposed shortcut promoted by a man named Lansford Hastings, who claimed it would save 300 miles. Reed, ever the optimist, convinced the others to follow. It would lead them through deserts, mountains, and a nightmare from which few would return. By late July, the wagons rolled into Utah's Great Salt Lake Desert, an endless stretch of white salt shimmering under the sun. Hastings had promised it would take a week. It took nearly 3. Oxen collapsed, tongues swollen from thirst. Wagons broke apart in the blinding heat. The shortcut had cost them precious weeks. When they finally reached the Sierra Nevada, the first flakes of snow began to fall. The mountains loomed ahead like walls of stone and ice. Exhausted and starving, they pressed on. But in late October, a blizzard swept across the pass, sealing it shut. The trail vanished under the snow. The Donner Party was trapped. At Truckee Lake, today known as Donner Lake, they built makeshift cabins from pine logs. Inside, the air reeked of smoke and fear. They slaughtered their remaining oxen, boiling the hides for soup. Days blurred into nights of hunger and frostbite. Some prayed. Others simply stared into the fire, lips cracked, eyes hollow. Miles away, George Donner's wagon had broken an axle near Alder Creek. His group, 19 souls, set up their own camp. The snow buried them deeper with every storm. Frostbite blackened their fingers. Children cried through the nights, their voices fading into silence. In December, with supplies gone and no rescue in sight, 15 of the strongest men and women made a desperate choice. They would walk out, through the mountains, on foot, to find help. They called themselves the Forlorn Hope. Wrapped in rags, faces gaunt and hollow, they set out into the white void. They carried little more than rifles, snowshoes, and the will to live. 4 days, they trudged through blizzards, blinded by the endless white. The wind howled like something alive. One by one, they began to fall, frozen, starving, dying where they stood. And then came the moment none of them would ever speak of again. When the last scraps of food were gone, they looked at the bodies in the snow and made their choice. The mountains swallowed their screams. And back at the lake, the others still waited, watching the horizon for help that never came. The snow kept falling. The Forlorn Hope stumbled onward through the Sierra's deathly silence, their eyes sunken, their minds unraveling. They no longer walked so much as drifted, haunted figures moving through a world of endless white. After more than 2 weeks, only 7 remained alive. The rest lay behind them, frozen in grotesque shapes, their faces locked in terror. Snow had buried some. Others they could not bear to cover. Desperation had stripped away everything: morality, identity, humanity itself. When the first body was cut apart, no one spoke. The meat was frozen, almost unrecognizable. They cooked it over a small fire made from twigs and bone. No one dared look one another in the eye. They ate in silence, knowing that this was the price of survival. After 33 days, the survivors, barely alive, staggered into a Native American village. The people there, horrified but merciful, offered food and shelter. Word spread quickly. Relief parties were organized. Help was finally coming. But for most of the Donner Party, it was already too late. Back at Truckee Lake, time had stopped. The snowdrifts outside the cabins were higher than the roofs. The bodies of oxen lay frozen solid. Inside, Families huddled beneath blankets stiff with frost. Children whimpered for food that no longer existed. The days were endless grey, the nights colder than death itself. James Reed, who had been banished months earlier after a fight that turned deadly, was alive, hundreds of miles away. He had reached safety in California and now fought to raise a rescue team. His wife and children were still trapped in the mountains. Every delay, every storm, meant the difference between life and death. Meanwhile, at Alder Creek, George Donner's group was fading fast. His hand had become infected from a wound sustained while repairing a wagon. His wife, Tamsen, refused to leave his side. Each morning, she would wake to find more faces gone, another family lost to starvation or cold. The snow muffled their screams, turning death into something quiet, almost peaceful. By February 1847, the first rescue team finally reached the camps. They had expected suffering. They had not expected what they found. Cabins filled with the stench of rot. Bones scattered near the hearths. Half-burned limbs lying beside the fire. Some survivors were too weak to stand. Their eyes glimmered with madness. A few still clutched the remains of those they had loved. One rescuer wrote later that he would never forget the sound, a rasping, animal-like cry that came from one of the women when she realized help had arrived. It wasn't joy. It was something else. A sound made by someone who had seen too much of hell. They carried out the living, leaving the dead behind. But storms closed in again, forcing them to retreat before everyone could be saved. Those left behind watched the rescuers disappear into the snow, their only chance at salvation fading into the white horizon. In the following weeks, more relief parties came. Each time, they found fewer alive. Children crying beside the corpses of their parents. Men with frostbitten faces, too weak to move. And each time, they found evidence, undeniable, horrifying, that the survivors had turned to the unthinkable again and again. When the final rescue team reached Alder Creek, they found George Donner still clinging to life. His wife, Tamsen, had refused to leave him, even when rescuers begged her to come. The next morning, she was gone, lost to the snow, her body never found. The nightmare was ending, but for the few who lived, it would never truly be over. When the last rescue team descended the Sierra Nevada in April 1847, winter finally began to loosen its grip. The snow melted, revealing what had been hidden for months. Broken wagons, gnawed bones, and the silent remnants of 81 souls who had dared to cross the mountains. Only 45 had survived. They emerged from the wilderness like ghosts, sunken and hollow, eyes reflecting things they would never speak of again. The rescuers tried to keep them separate from the crowds waiting in the valley, but word spread fast. The tale of the Donner Party, of cannibalism, madness, and survival, spread through the settlements like wildfire. People whispered the names of the survivors as though they carried a curse. James Reed was among those who returned. Against all odds, his wife Margaret and their children had survived. When he finally saw them, she was barely recognizable, her hair matted, her body frail. They embraced in silence, both too haunted for words. Reed would spend the rest of his life defending their honor, trying to prove that what they had done in those mountains was not sin but necessity. Others were not so lucky. The Breen family survived almost intact, but their youngest child never spoke again. The Graves children were orphaned. The Murphy cabin, when discovered, was a scene of horror so grotesque that rescuers refused to describe it in full. What they did right was enough to ensure that Donner would forever mean hunger, despair, and the collapse of everything human. Months later, when spring came to the mountains, scavengers and explorers climbed to what had once been Truckee Lake. They found the remains of the camps, half buried in the thawing earth, the logs blackened by fire. Scattered bones lay among the melted snow. Some were clean, stripped to the marrow. Others bore the marks of knives. It was said that the smell still lingered, an odor of smoke, decay, and something that had once been human. In time, California would become the land of gold and fortune that those pioneers had dreamed of. Towns would rise, railroads would come, and the trail they took would be paved over by progress. But the mountains never forgot. The pass where they died became known as Donner Pass, a monument carved not from stone, but from memory and suffering. George and Tamsen Donner's bodies were never found. Some said she died beside him, her arms wrapped around his as the cold took them both. Others whispered that she was last seen walking into the storm, refusing rescue, her eyes fixed on the mountains. Her story became legend, the last echo of a tragedy that tested the limits of the human soul. Years later, the survivors tried to rebuild their lives. They married, had children, opened businesses, but the whispers never stopped. In every town they settled, someone would eventually ask the question, "Were you one of them?" And in that moment, all the years between melted away, and they were once again trapped in the snow. For all their suffering, the Donner Party had not been destroyed by the mountains, they had been revealed by them. Stripped of civilization, stripped of illusion, they showed the raw edge of what survival truly means. Some called them monsters, others called them heroes. But perhaps they were simply human, terribly, tragically human. In the Sierra Nevada, where the pines still whisper in the wind, winter always returns. And when it does, the snow falls quietly over the pass, covering the ground where the Donner Party once waited for spring, and where the mountains still keep their dead.